Well, hi everybody, it's Kim Winter from Logistics Executive Group again, and welcome to our latest Vodcast. Thank you for giving up your time today. Joined by a couple of very special guests today in Oman, in the city of Muscat, or close to Muscat. We'll hear a little bit more about that. But before I start, gentlemen, Mark Hardiman, CEO of Port of Salalah, and Sunil Joseph, COO of Port of Salalah. Salam alaikum, gentlemen.
Alaikum salam.
And Ramadan Kareem.
Afwan. Thank you so much, Kim. Nice to be here.
Very good. Thanks for joining us. And I trust that you're just about at the end of the day, Thursday here, and we hope you have a great weekend. As we start, as I said, Mark, you are the Chief Executive Officer of the Port of Salalah. Sunil, you're the Chief Operating Officer. Why don't we start? Most of our audience really enjoys finding out a little bit about the upbringing and background of our guests, and then we'll get into Port of Salalah, your backgrounds, careers, and what's going on in Oman. So maybe Sunil, we'll start with you. Where were you brought up? Where did it all start for you?
Well, I'm from India. I'm from a small port city down south called Cochin, which is one of the maritime ports in India. So I have completely gotten used to a different industry, but I somehow got fascinated by the ports, and then I joined up with Maersk way back in 1993. And then started working from there. So I was more of the commercial side. And just wish to correct you, I'm its Chief Commercial Officer for Port of Salalah. So I have always had that commercial, interest, and I've worked from there. Then I moved to the Middle East in 1996, and then worked in UAE for quite some time. And then moved on to Qatar with Maersk, as well as then came to Oman from 2006 to 8. Moved to Saudi, where we have a Saudi cluster that includes Saudi, Bahrain, and Yemen. And I was heading that for about 5 years. And then I thought, we've had enough of the lineup. Why don't I just also have a taste of the ports to see how does it feel to be on the other side of that? So then I moved to APM terminals, worked in India for some time, came back to Bahrain terminal, and now I'm here for the last 1 year.
Wow, that's a big journey around the Middle East in particular. So well done so far. Mark, where did it all start for you? Which country? What happened when you were a kid? And how the hell did you end up in the ports industry?
Great question, Kim. So I'll give a little bit my backstory, I suppose. So I'm a real farm boy. I grew up in South Africa. My mother was Dutch and my father's South African, but I was born and bred in South Africa. Like I said, my dad, who actually still farms he's farming macadamia nuts, actually, of all things. He's still on the farm that I grew up on. It was a great upbringing, really great lifestyle. And then I suppose typical, like many of us, right? You don't quite know where life is going to take you. I came out of school and then went to the army for a little bit, and then decided, well, I need to sort of find something that I'm going to do in life. So my original intention actually was to go to sea, and I started at a naval college, a maritime college. But then, unfortunately, I actually failed an eye test at the South African Department of Transport because I've got a very slight color blindness. And that, of course, doesn't work when you want to go to sea. So that kind of cemented my future, I suppose, more on the land side of our industry, as opposed to my original intention of going to sea. So that was really how I got into it, I suppose. And then I started off, after studying, I went into work as a trainee. Actually, the first company I worked for was MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company in South Africa. And then the career just progressed, I suppose. From there, I joined Maersk a couple of years later, and then got an opportunity abroad after a couple of years as a fairly young chap of around 27. I took my first international assignment, assuming it was going to be just for a short while. And then moved back to South Africa, but it hasn't been a short while. I'm now on country number 7, and that's a combination of working in Africa. My first assignment was in Nigeria, and then a bit in my first stint in the Middle East was actually in Egypt. From Egypt, I then moved to Europe for a bit to Belgium, and then a lot of the rest of my experience has then been in the Gulf, so Dubai, Bahrain as well, and now Oman for the last 3 years. Originally started off on the liner side of it. About the first 5 years of my career was the liner side, but then since then I've now been in ports. So a little bit of an earlier transition, the same background as Sunil, I suppose, but an earlier transition into the port side. So I've been in the ports now for almost 25 years in that way as well. So yeah, it's interesting, and I didn't quite know it was but I very much enjoy what I do, and it's a great industry to be a part of. That's for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I've been to the beautiful Sultanate of Oman many times, and some great times there. It's extremely beautiful country, and the culture there is what you call really, really authentic. It's down to earth. The people are very cosmopolitan, of course, having been a centre of a trading and maritime centre for over many hundreds of years, of course, over the ages. It's extremely interesting history there, as well as the architecture. Port of Salalah is a major port in the region. Tell us a little bit about the port and its significance and what happens there. Maybe, Mark, we could start with you, and Sunil will a couple of things from you later.
Yeah, absolutely. So Port of Salalah is a super interesting place, and I mean, as I just explained, I've been to many parts of the world, and I really love Oman. I mean, it's just such a fantastic country, and I'm not just saying that. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean, you got, I think, some of the most friendly people in the world here. It really is a lovely place. A lot of natural beauty, of course, as well. And it is really just a pleasure to be here. Salalah is a special place, and I think. I know a lot of the success of the Port of Salalah is very much built around geographical location. I think that we're on a key trading route, of course, between East and West, very strategically located. And that also then ties into the history of Oman, in that sense as well, because of the proximity to some of those key markets and being on that main trading lane. And that really has cemented the transshipment side of the business, which people know about as well, but there's a lot more to Salalah than just transshipment. But that has really been, I think, the key to what has driven our business in the last 2 decades. And the reason I say 2 decades is because that's how long the port has been operating, the current concession that we have on behalf of the government. But we should also say is that the Port of Salalah, previously known as Port Reassessing, the traditional name, has been in existence for a lot longer than that. It's been a traditional trading point, for many centuries in that sense as well. And it's a very super interesting history, if you look back into the whole of Oman, but in particular this coastline, where we are now in the southern part. And yeah, that's very much what it is in terms of the context of where the business is at the moment. But Sunil, maybe you want to add a bit to that part as well. You know the region, if not better than me, right?
No, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Salalah is, before anything else, a very favorite place for me because it's closer to, it has a lot of resemblance to my hometown, which is Kerala. It's green, it's got the nice tropical weather. So I'm very comfortable in Salalah. But apart from that, work-wise, from the port, when we look at it, it is still, I feel, a very virgin, port arrangement, port setup, where there is a multi-port. You have ample opportunities to develop further. There's a lot more exploration that can be done. There is a lot more expansion that can be done with the free zone, with the airport, with the port, all still in a very nascent. Not the port, the Salalah free zone and the other parts of the economy still to gather momentum. So I think we can be, based on the networks that call into Port of Salalah today, with all the one of the best world's biggest two carriers, Maersk and MSC, have got their key networks in Salalah. So I think there's a lot that Salalah has to offer to a potential customer. So that also gives more opportunities for further growth. And apart from that, I think the beauty of Salalah is also the multi-port setup here, where your ability to expand into the supply chain goes beyond just containers. So you can do, destuffing, destuff delivery, a lot of value-added services, etc. So I think the limits to what you can go to is absolutely, much higher than any other location. So the key geographic location itself is unique. Its unique place in the geography itself is one of the key aspects of the attraction here.
Sure. So just to explain to our audience, you're sort of next door to Yemen. You're just across the road from Iran, up a bit further up the map, up to Pakistan. India's over the ocean, and then straight into the Straits of Hormuz, into the Gulf with all of the Gulf states. So extremely strategic positioning there. And as you say, a hub for trading over many hundreds of years. Perhaps, sorry, go ahead, Sunil.
No, absolutely. So, and I think these are all the next developing countries, including the likes of Somalia, the Yemen reconstruction. So as you rightly said, the Indian subcontinent, the African market. So we are actually here smack in the middle of this huge potential growth areas of the future.
So Mark, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the value of Port of Salalah to the economy. What sort of goods are being handled there? What's the economic value proposition from a port of Salalah? Because you've got 2 or 3 other ports within the country of Oman, but you have the strategic advantage of location to a degree. And so what happens there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Salalah, again, very much around geographical location, and you mentioned this one as one. I think, key markets we're talking there is East Africa as well as South Asia, where we have the close proximity to. And as a result of what we've spoken about, already spoken about it at quite length, is the transshipment side of the business, as we said. The difference between Salalah and the other main ports in Oman is the fact that the others are more gateways. Of course, they have, especially Soha, they have a much bigger captive market in the sense that they're much bigger, closer to a bigger, cosmopolitan, or let's say population density market, let's say. Salalah in itself, the town is relatively small, so we don't have a big amounts of gate cargo. So, but that's something that certainly we plan to change in terms of our offerings. We want to capture a lot more of the volume that can go through the gates. And again, I come back to the geographical location, because we're close to those key markets, those big East African, South Asian, and other parts of the Gulf markets. We have the ability to service those from Salalah, again, being on that east-west trade, where you can use Salalah a lot more as a staging area, for some of your closer access to those markets. And I think one of the things, I know we'll touch on COVID a bit more later on, but one of the things we've learned about COVID is that the market is demanding slightly shorter supply chains than was the case before. So we have that ability, let's say, to be that staging area for some of those key markets. But on your point specifically, Kim, about what value do we add, to the economy, is that we, besides the transshipment, which creates a lot of jobs, of course, we're the biggest employer actually in this region, in the Darfur region of Oman. That obviously contributes significantly to the economy, as well as our prioritization around trying to award procurement contracts, etc., to the local economy. I think that brings in a lot of value. We also are a gateway, and we're the world's largest exporter of gypsum and limestone, and that's a key contributor to the economy, in the sense that we are the gateway for the rest of the world for these commodities. So without the Port of Salalah being here, you wouldn't have that gateway, or else you would have a lot longer distance to travel to, because we're close to those mineral deposits, and we're close to those mines. So I think it's a very huge part of our business as well. People very often think about, obviously the container side of it, which is massively important, but we have especially the dry bulk side, which is very, very important for the economy as the main gateway to the world, for predominantly gypsum, but limestone to a certain extent as well.
Yeah. And what is gypsum used for?
Yeah, gypsum is used predominantly, of course, in the construction industry. You make gypsum board out of it, and you're also using it in the manufacture of cement, etc. That's the predominant use of it, and it's going to some of those key markets. The biggest one, of course, close by is India, and then you're having, of course, massive country, huge consumption, a lot of construction going on. A very good proximity to that market, but then further east as well, towards Southeast Asian countries. That is also some of the markets where these commodities are going to.
Good stuff. And Sunil, talk to us a little bit about the last 12 months. There's been a lot of upheaval, of course, globally, the pandemic. We've heard a lot about how carriers have been doing very, very well. Some of the big ocean carriers have made significant profits, far, far greater than previously held or anticipated, even perhaps many of them. Has this been something that's affected ports? Has ports been helping to drive that profitability? What's been the ecosystem there?
Absolutely. And I think, Kim, you touched upon a very interesting topic, which is, at a point when the world is facing a very dire situation because of the COVID, I think it is also becoming a transformational time for the shipping industry itself. So while the shipping industry had expected a severe drop in volumes and demand and everything, it did happen for the first quarter. However, things started slowly picking up. As a precaution, they had actually parked their ships and there was a lot of idle fleet at that time.
So, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about any lessons learned or any changes that have occurred in the business over the last 12 months or so, with all of the dramas that have been taking place globally right throughout the supply chain? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of lessons in the last 12 months. I think, everybody's been in the same boat, so to speak, and really trying to adjust as we go along. I mean, nobody knew what was coming. And I just remember a year back and the amounts of uncertainty that we had, it was phenomenal. We really didn't know which way things were going to go. And from a volume perspective, is that has actually been very positive, a lot more positive than we had expected. But I mean, to answer your question there specifically around lessons learned, what we did, and I think this was very much a strong lesson for me, and in a positive way, is that when you have such a crisis like we face, is that you need to make sure you're setting very clear priorities from day number one. And this worked very well for us. And I'll give a bit more detail on that. And that the first priority is you have to make sure your people are safe. And that was very much our guiding principle. So you're making sure, for example, that you're having the best possible PPE that you can put in place. When you have this pandemic, it's worth spending, money on this to make sure your people are kept safe. You make sure you got the awareness. People understand the risks of what we're dealing with. We understand a bit better now than we did 12 months ago, of course. But you just need to really make sure that people are aware. And we put a lot of effort into that, and that served us very well. We were able to look after our people. The second priority that we put in place was, as a fundamental, was to make sure we looked after the supply chain. So we realized, as a hub port especially, we have a crucial role to play in the regional and even the global economy in terms of making sure the supply chain remained fluid. We don't know all the time what's in the containers that we're moving around, but we knew it could be very important things that need to get to other parts of the world. And as a hub, you're having a high amount of throughput. You need to make sure that is protected. So we did absolutely everything we could to make sure that remained in place, and we protected that as our business. We did everything we possibly could to ensure that, like I said, the supply chain remained fluid. And then the third priority we put in place was to making sure we had a sustainable business. Of course, if you don't have a sustainable business through a crisis, through anything, things are not going to work. So very basically said, I suppose, is that, make sure your staff continues to get paid on time despite any kinds of uncertainty. Make sure your suppliers get paid on time. These kinds of very basic principles in that sense as well. And that served us very well. I would say that served us very well. So, if we had to do this again, which hopefully we never have to, but these would be the kinds of things I think us as leadership or if I was in a business, this one or another, these are the kinds of things that I would make sure were very well, quite simple in the sense to articulate, but things people are able to relate to in that sense as well. And that creates that sense of purpose. But I think the most important thing, I'll just underline that again, is as long as you make sure you're looking after your people, making sure your people feel safe, they will continue to deliver for you as well. And I think that is really a fundamental thing for all of us.
Awesome. And just to add to what Mark mentioned, I think we also did look after the local gate customers, our importers and exporters, who were really concerned about the additional waiting time in the port because of all the delays that are happening elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. So we made sure that we give them sufficient priority so that their supply chains are not affected. They get their cargo, especially the essential ones like the medicines and all that. We were prioritized. So these were some of the additional things that we have taken up during the COVID times.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. So I guess like most businesses of any sort, you have plans for the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years. Have any of those plans changed as a result of the last 12 months? And in which ways, if so, how have they changed?
So I would say probably not, because we had our plans already in place. Of course, during the crisis, especially in the beginning, we weren't sure. I mean, we had no idea what the reaction of the markets was going to be in terms of COVID, what the disruption on supply chain was going to be. So we put things on pause for a certain point. Let's say, well, are we reassessing? Do we really need to expand, for example? In that sense, I mean, are we going to look at, volumes severely declining around the world? Of course, this is the way things were, the flavor of things, 12 months ago, or even more, 14 months ago. So, however, is that what was quite clear is that as we got into it, we realized that the systems, the economy, everything that we're in is quite resilient. It's changed a lot around people consuming a lot more from home as opposed to going out for services, which of course is also the reason why, and you mentioned that earlier on, why volumes have been skyrocketing and our customers have been making, unprecedented healthy profits in that sense as well. But what it has underlined, and that's why I said it didn't change, is that it has, for us, it's underlined how important actually investing in the future is, because the volumes are high. We, as a hub port, we act for many reasons. We act as a shock absorber, if you like, in that sense, for the network, for our customers as well. So it's important that we continue to protect that market position. So I would say, if anything, it's actually underlined the importance of making sure that we progress with the plans that we had in place, rather than changing them in any way whatsoever. So that's really the realization that we have had reinforced, I suppose, in the turbulent year that was last year.
Sure. So one of the questions I've got in my mind is ports look extremely expensive to operate. There's an enormous amount of big equipment. There's container cranes. There's tugboats, which I presume belong to the port operations business. There's massive vehicles moving equipment everywhere, and general MHD everywhere looks extremely expensive, let alone from the acquisition point of view, capital expenditure, and then operating expenditure and maintenance. It just looks to me awfully expensive. If that is the case, and confirm whether I'm right or wrong, what are the main areas that you have to focus on to keep a port operating? And does the port need to operate 24 hours a day, or is it just certain hours a day?
Sunil, actually, maybe you want to give it a go, and then I'll add into that.
No, I mean, shipping industry, apart from the shipping lines itself, as you rightly said, we are one of the heavy, capital intensive business, as you rightly said. So there's a lot of heavy, expensive equipments, and maintaining them and making sure that, they produce enough to be able to give a non-stop service 24/7 to the ships that come and go is extremely vital to make sure that the supply chain is maintained, right? So any small disruption will lead to a stoppage of service, and that relates to yard congestion, which will lead to port congestion, which will lead to vessels waiting outside. So it's extremely critical for our maintenance and everything to be extremely, very agile at any given point, and that's something that we do. This also calls for maintaining of our, as you rightly said, the tags, the pilots, especially during these difficult times, to make sure that they are all safeguarded to ensure an uninterrupted, service. So you're spot on. I think this is something that is extremely critical for our operations, and we do operate 24/7, irrespective of whether it is holidays or whatever. It's only the admin staff that gets to go home, but go take the off days. However, the port staff works continuously on shifts in 24/7 operation.
Sure. I'll just add a bit to that one, if you don't mind, Kim. So obviously it depends on what port, what environment you're working in. And as you mentioned, we are in an industry which is very asset heavy, very heavy on the costs as well. So you need to be very careful, of course, with such heavy industry in terms of cost control, etc. If you're working in a gate environment, let's say, and the market doesn't need, let's say, service 24/7, of course, like in many places in North America, the costs are very high for night shifts, for example, then you would adjust it, let's say. But of course, a hub port like us, we have to be 365, 24/7, 365, let's say, because we are, continuously needing to keep the supply chain moving. And that's what our customers demand of us in that sense as well. But then we also do need to make, and we are making a lot of investments on equipment, and on new technologies as well to keep our fleets, because of course a lot of economies of scale. We need to make sure we're keeping our fleet running very optimally, and also making sure things are kept very efficient in that sense as well. So we have a lot of digitization of our assets in that sense, and that's driving the efficiencies that we need, which is all driven by remaining cost competitive.
Okay.
And that's very important for an industry like ours, of course, or at least for a business the size of ours in that sense as well.
Certain amount of planning, by the sound of it, needs to take place well in advance, especially for capital expenditure and for the MHD items. A question I've always had flying around the world back in the day when we used to fly pretty regularly. You fly over Singapore, or you fly over your port, or any other port around the major port around the world, Rotterdam, etc. You see many, many ships sitting outside the port. And I've always wondered, it's costing somebody to have those ships sitting out there, certainly the shipping lines, but how far does the reach of the port go? Do they have to pay costings for sitting outside of the port to the port for demurrage, or is that a cost only to the shipping lines themselves?
Typically, it depends on commercial arrangements I guess, in different parts of the world, but very typically that's not a direct cost for the port. That is then, of course, the shipping lines, because they're the ones that are incurring those costs. But what we do, of course, and we're very mindful of the fact that, just like I had mentioned before about the fact we have a heavy cost base, of course, our customers do as well. They're operating very big assets, very expensive assets as well. And then our part in the supply chain is to make sure that their cost burden is not high, because we also need to be careful is that especially in this region, the product we offer, some of the products we offer, not all of them, but some of the products we offer are very commoditized, meaning that they could go for a lower cost, somewhere else and get the same service. And that's particularly in the transshipment market in the Middle East. I think that's well known and well understood by many. So if we are the one, let's say, causing, in your example, those ships waiting outside, they're going to quickly find somewhere else to go in that sense. So that's where we need to remain very efficient. We need to remain very productive, and that's where we pride ourselves actually as being one of the most productive ports in the region on the container terminal side. That's something that everyone measures. Of course, our shipping line customers measure us very heavily on as one, a big focus that we have. So we work, a lot of it comes to planning. We make sure we're planning berthing windows for the customers, telling them when they need to bring their ships based on their schedule as well. If that is adhered to, let's say, then that waiting time that you mentioned is then of course minimized as much as possible. And we're very mindful of the costs for our customers, so we need to make sure that we plan our resources accordingly as well.
So if you have a berthing schedule and maybe Sunil, you can talk to this one briefly. If you've got a berthing schedule, you've got a mega container ship coming in, and two of your cranes break down. And it may be able to get in, but you can't turn it around within the 36 hours or 72 hours that it's planned to turn around. it takes an extra day or two. Who bears that cost?
Yeah. I think, Mark, would you like to take that question?
You know why I'm asking this question, guys, is because the Suez Crisis that we recently observed, we're now hearing on CNN and elsewhere about, who's bearing the cost. It's the $1 billion, ballpark. So what's happening? So in your case, if you had a schedule and you had problems within the port that slowed down a ship and it slowed down its turnaround, where would the cost lie in that? Would that be an insurance issue?
So generally we have a berthing window. The shipping lines will have to adhere to that window. So they have to come on time and then leave on time. So usually what happens is that if there are delays which are caused by us, I think when you look at the average, that kind of delays are very minimal. So usually what happens is that the ships are not able to make it on schedule because of delays from the previous ports or the ports which are coming next. However, there are, as Mark mentioned earlier, there are ports where just to get in, you have to wait for a couple of days, or if not, there are ports where peaks are also required. So this actually affects the next ports.
Yeah.
So they're not unable to come. But yes, it is not something that happens quite often, especially in our case. We've not had such an incident. I don't know in my memory. That's why I said maybe Mark can.
So not even talking about you, but just in the port industry.
No, in the port industry, I don't think
it causes a problem. And with scheduling, who pays? The customer, the shipping line, the port.
So I think it's basically something that gets absorbed into the system. So I don't think that anyone compensate the other for these kind of things because these are unscheduled.
Force majeure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll maybe just add a little bit to that. It's a great question, right? And obviously there's a lot of players in the supply chain in that sense as well. So typically, to answer your question, I suppose simply, Kim, is that what happens is that everyone kind of bears their own cost in that sense, based on their piece of it in that way as well. However, it does depend to a certain extent on individual commercial arrangements that may be in place, and it's not uncommon, let's say, whereby and just use a simple example, let's say a shipping line and a container terminal, whereby you will have in your SLA, your service level agreement with the shipping line, a penalty or an incentive mechanism into that one as well, whereby you won't be passing on direct costs. However, if you're exceeding, for example, performance on certain measures, you get paid a certain incentive. However, if you, of course, not achieving your agreement, let's say, then you might get a penalty in that sense as well. So it's not a direct cost, it's more of an indirect through the contractual kind of relationship, how these things work. But a lot of those things, and this is where we've worked very closely. Very great example you brought up is Suez at the moment. Of course, when that type of thing happens, the whole berthing window goes out the window because the whole schedule is messed up in that sense as well. And then what we do is we work very closely with our customers to make sure the resources are planned accordingly. So we knew exactly when the Suez had it opened. We knew which vessels to expect at what time. So we worked with the customer to make sure that we could accommodate the vessels in the right sequence, because of course everything is now a bit more turbulent. And then, for example, the customer can prioritize which vessels they need. So then they can also have the ability. So to say, for example, if you've got two vessels coming from Europe, and they're stopping in Salalah, they're going to China. They say, well, the one vessel is 5 days behind schedule, the other vessel is only 3 days. So you prioritize the one which is more urgent in that example. And in that sense, then they can also slow down the vessel which doesn't need to be worked earlier, saving fuel costs in that sense as well for them. So this is how we work very closely with our customers to make sure that a big expense for them, of course, the two biggest expense for the shipping customer is our cost, the ones that pay to the port, and then the other one is the bunkers, the fuel. So if we can help them save a little bit of that fuel cost, then this is where these kinds of collaboration and great working relationships come in and are very important.
Excellent. So very dynamic planning in operations by the sound of it.
And I think just to add to that, and the biggest challenge for the shipping lines or the shipping industry is just that, because they don't account for these eventualities into their pricing model. So, for example, when they price based on the actual port costs and the steaming time, the vessel slot cost, etc. However, a Suez situation would have cost billions of dollars to shipping lines, and that cannot be passed on to the customers. So this is where the challenge of the shipping industry is, because a lot of these eventualities do happen. Weather situations, ships getting delayed, all this. So good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need deep pockets and you need a long vision to run a shipping line by the sound of it. Hey, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and drill down and hear a little bit about the internal operations of ports. It's been very interesting to me, and I hope the audience has likewise been as interested to hear just how ports operate in the ecosystem around that. With all of our guests, I always like to finish up with a couple of questions around for our audience and some tips for people looking to come into the industry or exploring the particular, in this case, the ports and maritime space. First of all, to you, Sunil, a quick fire question. In terms of people wanting to get into the industry, what would your tip be for them to explore, to look around, to find out how to enter into an industry? As we know, the supply chain, logistics, maritime sectors have exploded to an extent with consumer patterns changing over the last 12, 18 months, or escalating in terms of e-commerce and all of the above, home deliveries and all of that. So from your perspective, from people who are interested, young people in particular, interested in getting into the port sector, what would some tips, well, maybe one tip from you about how to look to explore to get into the sector?
So I think global trade is the one that keeps the globe going, and supply chain plays a vital role in the global trade, and we are a major part of that, supply chain. So we are essentially helping the businesses and the global trade to flourish. So our basic role is to solve the problems of the people who do these trades. So when they have a problem, we offer them a solution. So, for example, during the COVID time is supposed to be, or it is a big problem. However, how do you find opportunities in this problem? You go to a customer to understand what are the issues that you're facing, that you're challenging. It makes you think, it makes you explore more options, to look at more solutions which you solve for that customer, which will eventually uplift the trade. So you're actually contributing to something that is quite large, much beyond your own geography. You're actually touching a much wider world with your little contribution. So that's where I find passion in.
Okay, thanks for that. Mark, any tips from you? Maybe one tip for young people wanting to get into the industry. How should they look to enter? Where should they inquire about joining? I mean, there are thousands of ports around the world. It's a massive sector, probably not well understood by the general public, but very exciting industry, as we've heard today. Where should people look?
Yeah, I think great question. I think it's a super exciting time for young people to be getting involved in the industry. And the reason I say that, compared to maybe the days when Sunil and I joined, is that you're seeing a lot of disruption going on in the industry now. And what I mean by that is that you're seeing the traditional roles changing a lot. The big players, or not just the big players, all the players in the industry are looking to see how you integrate different elements of logistics a lot more than would have been the case before. So you may have been a ports guy before, you may have been a shipping line guy before, you may have been a forwarding and clearing guy before, let's say, versus now, and the way I see the industry going is that a lot of these services are going to be a lot more integrated than they were before. So if anyone is looking to get into the industry, I would say start with something, look what you have. There's a lot of great universities and colleges and all sorts of education facilities out there, but keep an open mind about the fact that the industry is undergoing a change, and keep a generalist mindset, I would say, and try keep an open mind on different elements of it as well. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities even between sea and air now than there used to be before, in that sense as well. And the customers are becoming a lot more demanding, and this is going to require us to adjust the way we run the industry, let's say. So in that sense, I would say, see what you have as an opportunity, but then very much be open-minded and look for ways that you can be creative. It's not a traditionally very creative, I suppose, industry, let's say, but I think a lot of that is changing now, where we're looking for new solutions and new ways. And we have, digital printing, for example, coming in, and these, these kinds of things as well. And this is different ways we need to respond to as an industry about how we're actually going to be taking it forward, let's say.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Mark. Final quick fire question, 30 seconds from each of you. one tip on, first of all, you, Sunil. You've been around, you've been in many countries, you've been across quite a few sectors. What would be, if you look back now for your career, and the one lesson that you would like to have given yourself, or one tip that you would like to have had earlier in your career that's helped you and from a leadership role, what would that one tip be so people can maybe absorb that and consider that as well? What would be one thing that you've learned over the years that you could share with people that you think might be valuable from a leadership point of view?
Yeah, I think generally what we do when we're trying to sell from a commercial person, what you generally tell is still the customer about the features and facts about your product, right? Today in this world, that is actually of least importance and least interest for the customer. So today, the most important thing that I have learned is you just need to understand the business of the customer as well as him, or even better. So you need to be really looking out for things that can matter to him, and then go have a discussion where he will extract the problem you extract the problem that he has, study on it, work back, and then he sees you adding value. Then definitely you have a much better chance of creating a customer stickiness, ability to charge a premium, and still have a long-term relationship with that customer. So understanding the customer's business is extremely important in this.
Thanks, Sunil. Yeah, well said. Mark, over to you for the final word. Leadership, you've been around, you've no doubt made plenty of mistakes like I have over the years. We learned from those. What would be the one leadership tip you'd like to share with others who are sitting in on the podcast today?
Great question, Kim. I think if I had to sum it up in one word, I'd say empathy, probably, in that sense. So I think empathy is super important. And I was reflecting a little bit that while Sunil was talking as well, thinking about the same thing, is that from a leadership perspective, the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, be it the people that work for you or be it your customer, always helps you to respond in the right way, to understand what leadership is needed for people, for that circumstance, for that situation, let's say. But also, purely from a commercial aspect as well. If you're able to respond in an empathetic way, you are able to find the right solutions for what your customer needs, which ultimately, of course, is going to drive your business as well in the right way.
Well done. Look, some common themes there, gentlemen. Mark Hardiman, CEO, and Sunil Joseph, COO of the Port of Salalah. Thanks for your time today. Thank you for both taking the time out late on a Thursday.
Thank you so much, Kim. It was an absolute pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Great. And to our audience, thank you everybody around the world for taking time, spending it with us. As always, we offer our respect and thanks to everybody in the swim out there at the moment, across the supply chain and elsewhere across the economy, keeping us safe, working hard, all the people and first responders, the people in medical, right across, and all the services and assisting us. Thank you so much for all of your help. To our audience, please stay safe, distance, wash your hands, mask up, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.